Hello, HUM115 World Mythology students. Thank you for joining me for this online class lecture for Monday, February 8th, 2021. Thank you again for your flexibility and for recognizing that on Mondays and Fridays, you get a video lecture of this type from me, and then enough resources and activity to really occupy the rest of the hour once you start watching this video. And then on Wednesdays, we gather together via Zoom at our regular course time. The Zoom meeting invitation, which is there in D2L as an announcement, well, that'll always be the same link. Okay, so if you need to access our Wednesday Zoom meetings, until further notice, this is how we're rolling, that information will stay there on D2L as an announcement. Well, let me say thank you. Let's rewind a bit to those students that did join us on Wednesday. We had a very good class and an interesting discussion regarding the essay Problems of Defining Myth, right? Remember that? 1977. Somebody that picked a fight with this guy, Thomas Bulfinch, the author of our course textbook. Mythology is problematic. It can be. And as I reviewed your discussion forum responses, some things came to mind. I just want to walk through those real quick. What is mythology? You were asked. And you were provided a few different definitions, and then I was looking for you to make sense of them a bit. And you did a great job. The discussion forum participation in this course is excellent, and I'm super thankful for that. In fact, your ability to write me a few sentences after giving the course resources some thought, well, I don't care as much when that happened as much as it did. Sometimes in-person learning is not as effective as what I see go down in a discussion forum. Because whenever you were able to actually give it time and attention, you did. And your writing reflects that. Because much of the writing that I saw in the discussion forums, you can't fake it. You obviously went and watched 3 different versions of the same myth to be able to compare and contrast them. So, the What is Mythology forum, 3 things that struck me. 1, Percy Jackson. I don't know Percy Jackson the way some of you know Percy Jackson. That's great. What would Percy Jackson and this guy talk about if they sat down at a lunch? Can you imagine? Boy, now there's a cool midterm essay, right? Ooh, I'm not making that by any means a requirement. But I am interested in how an author like Percy Jackson allowed so many of you a frame of reference. Before you got into this course, you had a sense of what mythology was. Hey, I'll read up on Percy Jackson. I love admitting what I don't know. And that's one thing that I need to learn more about, is Percy Jackson's work in mythology. Something else that struck me? Somebody asked for the facts around mythology. Ooh, okay. We can try. I've got a few new resources on D2L that try to address that concern, and in fact would be a great springboard for other work in this course. The third thing that struck me from the What is Mythology forum is more than one student asked, why are these stories still told? Why are these mythological stories still told? I think that's a great question. I think every generation has answered that, or had to come up with an answer for it. Otherwise, we would stop telling these stories. Hey, why do we tell stories anyway? Why do we bother? Once upon a time, ... happily ever after. Why do we bother telling each other stories? If I say once upon a time I got in a car accident, but we all lived happily ever after, you want to know. I wonder if my story is anything like stories in your past. I wonder if what's to come might well, you might learn from my story and not make the same mistakes I did. You want to hear the story. You want to hear the story about the car accident. Ooh. You want to know the story I'm referring to? Somebody bring it up on Wednesday when we're in person in Zoom. Unmute yourself and say, hey, what about that car accident story? And I'll ask you if you want the mythological version or if you want the real version. But I'll tell it. I got to keep you tuning in, you see. Why do we still tell these mythological tales? Bullfinch had an answer to that. I don't have an exacting answer for that. Because mythology is a set of stories. I do believe that stories, well, they're happening all the time. Way before Facebook decided it was an add-on to their platform. In fact, how has the internet promoted people telling stories? They don't have to be true. They just have to be stories. There's something larger. I'm not addressing the students that said, why do we keep telling myths? I don't have an answer exactly for you. I can only respond that narratives are of critical importance. What is a narrative? It's an English teacher term for once upon a time, happily ever after, right? Doesn't even have to have exactly those components, but it's got to have the elements of a story, right? Forgive me if you think I'm overgeneralizing, but I am trying to reach the most students possible. If you are more steeped in literary criticism, mad props. And think about the stories that you will tell this week, right? Think about the stories from your life that you love to tell. Is there a moral to them, right? No, I'm not saying your stories are myths or my stories are myths. Ooh, but I'll tell you the mythological version of that car accident if you want. Would you like a mythological story about this mug? Yes, it's from the Dr. Smith collection, Colony North, a private apartment complex, East Lee Boulevard, Wilmington, Delaware. Not a myth. Not a myth. But a New Year's Eve long ago. You also responded in a discussion forum to different versions of the Pandora myth. That was super cool. Again, thank you. Thank you for giving this course and its materials the time necessary to sit down and say, all right, it's going to take me X number of minutes, and then I'm going to write them a few sentences. But I'm very, very happy about your observations. 3 things that struck me. 1, the Lego version was creative but left out details. Agreed. Left out details to an extent that it was wrong? Oh, maybe that's a definition of myth, is that the leaving out of details can still have the story be intact a little bit. Maybe a definition of myth that would include that the teller can add or embellish in the way that they would like. Instead of Pandora's box, it was a jar. Instead of Pandora's jar, all that is left at Colony North private apartment complex in Wilmington, Delaware, may be hope. There may be more than that there. I haven't been there in a very long time. That's something that struck me. The last thing that struck me in the Pandora forum is that somebody said Zeus intended to use people like pawns. Oh, and as somebody else alluded to the idea of like an angry god. I'm out to get you. You're going to obey or else. Thunderbolts and lightning. That's what we're talking about here. That's an interesting idea. What else can I say to that, right? We know that we are studying mythology, and therefore it doesn't have to provide us a religion or an explanation or anything else, but sometimes it can. Did you have a week last week where you felt like if there is a God, they are angry? Ancient peoples used myth to explain their lives, right? That's one use of myth. I don't. I remain super flexible about what we think about when we say myth, because as that essay, The Problem of Defining Myth, as that hit us last week, there's all this like religious connotation, and is it theology? Is it theology? Is it right and wrong? There's a lot of ways to spin it. What can we learn from it? Can we enjoy it? Can we enjoy it? Today's myth, Cupid and Psyche, a different telling of Cupid, right? We mentioned Cupid in a myth earlier, like last week, but in this myth, it is very specifically told between he and Psyche because his mom makes him do something. Again, I've taken the Gutenberg section on Cupid and Psyche, and I've cut and pasted it here onto D2L for your convenience. And I'm not going to read it to you. I'm not going to try to tell you this narrative. I'd like you to kick back and just read it, right? But I want to make sure that you understand a word that is in the last paragraph. Last paragraph, the fable of Cupid and Psyche is usually considered allegorical. What is an allegory? You got similes and metaphors and blah, blah, blah. No, allegory is where every single thing in the story stands for something else. Okay? Every element in the story stands for something else. So Bullfinch mentions the Greek name for a butterfly is Psyche, and the same word means the soul. So we're not actually talking about a person named Psyche. We're actually talking about the human soul. Every time you see Psyche, replace it with the human soul. Whew, that's a lot to take in suddenly. That's a lot to take in. We'll talk more about allegory at another moment, but I find it interesting how Bullfinch tells this story and then drops it on you that maybe everything in it stands for something else. And therefore, we've got this huge conclusion to draw. There is no illustration of the immortality of the soul so striking and beautiful as the butterfly, bursting on brilliant wings from the tomb in which it has lain after a dull, groveling caterpillar existence, to flutter in the blaze of day and feed on the most fragrant and delicate productions of the spring. Psyche, then, is the human soul, which is purified by sufferings and misfortunes, and is thus prepared for the enjoyment of true and pure happiness. Are you feeling purified by sufferings? Oh, that's something else there, Thomas Bullfinch. That is something else. We use the word psyche, actually. Not as a character name, but it's an English language word. It means your mental constitution. It means your ego and your id, if you're a Freudian. It means psychology, right? It's the psychology of you. Your psyche is different than mine, right? Is your psyche prepared for the enjoyment of true and pure happiness? Whoa. Oh, man. The stakes are high in Bullfinch's retelling of this myth. He does mention, last sentence, in works of art, Psyche is represented as a maiden with the wings of a butterfly along with Cupid in the different situations described in the allegory. As you read this story, picture Psyche with the wings of a butterfly. Hey, would you like a different version than Bullfinch's before you go a-reading? I expect you to. But also there's a just under 10-minute version produced as a class project back in 2009, found on YouTube. Oh, I provided you the link to it because it's not Lego. It's Barbies. And it's really well done. It's got 97,000 views. Can we wrap our heads around that for a second? 97,000 views because somebody put their Barbies together and made them talk and retold the story of Cupid and Psyche. To the student that asked, why do we still tell these stories? I ask those 97,000 people, because obviously it's a class project, but they did a really good job of it. They got some laughs out of it. They're very proud of it. And, well, things are changing. The way we tell stories is changing. And the way we talk about stories, I encourage you to look at the comments of that Cupid and Psyche YouTube video, because there's a debate about Cupid's name. In Greek mythology, it's one thing. In Roman mythology, it's another. All right, so I'd like you to check out today's myth. I'm not asking you to participate in a discussion forum, okay? You don't actually have to interact or write me up anything about this myth, but you might want to use it for your first discussion paper. You've got a discussion paper due, and that is on the 12th of February. It's like later this week, right? I believe it's 3 p.m. Click on assignments and discussion paper number 1, and you will see a description of what I'm looking for you to do in 500 words. Intro, body, conclusion. I will be talking about the myth of Cupid and Psyche, or as referred to in Greek mythology, Eros and Psyche. You cite Thomas Bullfinch and tell me what he said about him, and then you can go on to another resource, and you can go on to another paragraph about what you think about this myth. And in a concise 500-word essay, you can have a really good interaction with a story that's been told at least 97,000 times. 97 million times, if people like sharing it that much. All right, so there's that. Again, your first discussion paper is due on the 12th of February. That's the only thing that I have to get you to do between now and when I see you on Wednesday. Though when I see you on Wednesday, it still won't be due, and I'll just remind you about it over and over. And maybe you will have already gotten it done, right? Check out Cupid and Psyche, Barbie version, under Unit 2 on D2L. Now, I've got 2 other resources for you to check out. That video is under 10 minutes. Please do check out both the Greek God's family tree and the Roman God's family tree. Yeah, because all of these gods and goddesses are related. And to the student that said, I want to learn the facts about mythology, well, the lineage, who married who, who's related to who in what way, that's as much of the facts as can exist. And you'll find both of these family trees really interesting. Because I think we like infographics anymore. Way more than, if Thomas Bullfinch were to rewrite his book today, geez, what would that look like? I know that the family trees on these sites that are provided under Unit 2, and they're labeled such, Greek God's family tree, Roman God's family tree. They're interactive. On one of them, you can click on the name, and it may inspire you to say, hey, what is this myth of Midas? I've heard the King Midas, everything he touches turns to gold myth, but I didn't realize he was related to blah, 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 blah. Perhaps you find, I've taught Midas before, and maybe we'll cover that later this week, but I hope that those family trees are inspiring. Give them a few minutes, right? Because your first discussion paper comes in on the 12th, your second discussion paper will not be far behind. And I can tell you right now, you can get both of them done because one needs to be Greek and one needs to be Roman. Is that simply a name change? Or are there distinctions between the telling of Greek and Roman myths? Or do you just want to run with it and say, look, this guy made the myth and people are interpreting it in Legos, in Barbies, in other elements? All right, so I hope you feel enabled to be able to get your first discussion paper done. One more thing, last thing I want you to think about on Wednesday when I see you in Zoom. Question for you. I got a midterm, I got a final. And I am open to creativity. Can you tell? But 97,000 people watched this class project produced over a decade ago now. If you have any interest in wanting to make a contribution to the world like that, instead of writing me an essay, I don't know how I could say no. Do you want to do a video of a myth? Do you want to make a video of a myth? You going to produce something? You going to do something creative? You want to work in teams of 2? I don't think I could do teams of 3. I mean, if you want to work in teams of 2, it's because you already know somebody that you want to work with. And I don't know exactly who's where out there. But between now and Wednesday, could you give that some thought? Because I'll bring it up on Wednesday and say, what are your thoughts? And we'll sit in Zoom. All right, as always, folks, please email me with any questions or concerns. I'll catch you very soon. Have a good week. Thank you.